Welcome, welcome, welcome to Realty Resources and Realities. My name is Felicia Moore and I am your host. I want to thank you for joining us. We have been on a series, and that series is Renting Right. Renting Right. Those must know tips to have a smooth rental experience. And that's what I want to make sure that you have is a smooth rental experience. We're going to hit tip number 9, and that is our move-in check-in list. That means we've gotten through a whole lot and we are getting ready to move in those things that you need to know. I want to go back over. We went over number 1, our first step, which was the budget. The most important. Don't go past number 1 without getting all of those things resolved. Number 2, our location. Number 3, our property condition. Number 4, that most important lease agreement. And number 5, the property management and or landlord that you will be renting from. Your rights as a tenant. Number 6. Number 7, the neighbors and the community that you will live in. Number 8, which were utilities and services, that sometimes we don't think a lot about. And we are here today for number 9. But before we get into number 9, I always ask you to please like, share, and subscribe. This will be a way to be able to get it out to more people. We want to grow this show. We want to have you on the show if you want to come on. We want to deal with topics and concerns that interest you. So I've added on the screen my email, askfelicia@exitwestmidtown.com. Please share with me some ideas or things that you'd like to see delved into on the show, and or just reach out to me for questions or concerns. That doesn't mean you have to buy, rent, invest, or whatever in the property. If you just have a real estate related questions, I will get an answer. My broker of record, Michael Williams, will get you the answer, or we will find the answer for you. We want to be a resource to the community. I'm the Director of Resources and Engagement here, as well as being an associate broker. So if you have small groups or large groups or any groups, or you individually that have questions or concerns, let me come out and speak with your group, because if you are a property owner, there's so many scams and ways people can take your property without you even knowing it. I'd love to share that with you. So please keep that in mind. Also, again, like, sharing, and subscribing will help us get this out in the algorithm. I'm going to take a quick break, and then when I come back, we're going to delve right into our move-in checklist. Tip number 9 in renting right, the must-know tips for a smooth rental experience. So we will be right back and get into it. Okay, let's delve right into tip number 9. Tip number 9 is a big one, because you want to plan ahead. We don't want you doing anything without first planning ahead. And so that means that you are going to create a moving checklist. And I'm sure, with today, you can Google online and you can print one out for you. But you might have your pen and paper and just take a few notes to make sure you hit some of these things. You want to go ahead and get that moving truck booked and in advance, and start packing for your move. Now, I'm going to go into something about moving companies in a minute, but you want to make sure that you have a reputable moving company, because there are scams that come along with that. So I think I'll go straight into that while we're talking about it. Now, I know some people say, I'm not going to worry about that because my uncle, my cousin, my brother, or so and so has a truck and they're going to move me. We're going to rent a truck and they're going to move me. So if you're going to rent a truck, you're going to make sure that you check different prices and pricing. If you have it for a day, it's different than if you have it for several days. You want to make sure it's big enough. They can help you estimate how much room you will need in the truck so you can make few trips and not a whole lot. Hopefully, your uncle, cousin, brother has some experience in this and knows how to pack a truck. That's important. And then also, you want to make sure if you're moving furniture and that kind of thing, particularly glass and delicate items, some of them you may want to take in the car versus put in the truck. You want to make sure that the legs are wrapped so that they don't get scratched or dented. So there are a lot of things that a moving company will do because they're going to also protect themselves by protecting the things that they move so you don't ding them for having damaged their items. But your cousin or brother or whatever, they just want to move and they're not thinking about those things. So you might want to do it. If you're going to do it yourself, you might want to Google and do a little deeper dive. I can't get into all of that here on how to best move and how to pack moving if you're doing it for yourself. But I want to talk about moving companies real quick because I think it's important for me to do it while we're talking about it before we get into our next tip. So you have to watch out for moving company scams, and I have some here, some things that maybe a red flag that you may need to look at. Low ball quotes. You need to be cautious of moving companies that are offering significantly lower prices than anybody else. So you want to, at minimum, look at three different companies. I know it takes time, but it's important. And then that way you'll know if somebody's an outlier, if somebody's charging too much and somebody's charging too little. You might want to go somewhere in between. You want legitimate movers typically offer an in-person or virtual estimate to provide an accurate quote. So if you're moving stuff, you want them to see what they're moving in or have some sort of video evidence or whatever so that they can give you a better estimate. Avoid companies that don't do this, because what'll happen is you'll get everything set up and then they'll get out there and say, oh, well, this is going to be more because of X, Y, or Z. We want them to give you a good estimate. Large deposits. Most of the reputable companies don't require large amounts of money for deposit in advance. So if somebody's asking you for $300 in advance, you might want to say, is that reasonable? But again, you're going to have called several different companies, so you're going to get different costs. Paying a huge sum up front, it could be a red flag. Unclear terms and conditions. So just like I talk about the lease, you need to read that contract with that moving company and make sure you understand it and make sure the agreement outlines every service that's included. Like, are they going to be packing? Are they going to be assembling and disassembling furniture and other additional fees such as if you have stairs or there's a long distance haul. You want to know that stuff up front. And lack of licensing is the biggest thing. That's a no almost if you're using a professional company and your brother, cousin, uncle, whoever's moving you, friend, they're not going to have a license. But if you're going to hire a professional company, they should be licensed and they should be bonded. And you should know what happens and how you go about recouping any damages they may have to your property. You need to verify the company's registration. You can do that with the U.S. Department of Transportation, that's USDOT. And if you're in the U.S., you can look up the company's record online to confirm their legitimacy. And I would even further suggest that you look up the company with the Better Business Bureau to see if they're rated. If they're not rated, then you need to see if they've had any complaints at the BBB, and how and if they resolve those. Having complaints are not bad. Things will happen. But if someone complained to the Better Business Bureau about XYZ moving company, and you read that they didn't resolve that issue, that may not be a company for you because they don't have good customer service. So that's what we're where we are. We talked about getting that checklist and go ahead and getting all of that, deciding who and how you're going to be moved. When you're packing, you want to label everything. Some of the best tips are to label your boxes by room and its contents. So that way you know this came from the den and these are the contents. There are books in here, there office supplies in here, whatever is in there, and make sure it's easy for you to know. If there are glass things and they're fragile, you want to make sure that they're packed appropriately with bubble wrap or something that will make sure that they're not broken. And those fragile and glass items, you need to have them in another box marked that they came from the den, and that this is glass and it's fragile, and you want to mark that very clearly so whoever is moving you knows that this is not a box that can sit on the bottom and you pile everything on top of, and it's a box that needs to be handled carefully. I suggest if you are using vehicles as well as the moving truck, if it's really a fragile item, you might want to pack that in your car if you can, so that you're sure that it doesn't get messed up. Another big good tip is to pack a first night box. So you don't want to get there and then you got to rummage through a million boxes. So you might pack like you're going overnight with your toiletries, your prescriptions, change of clothes, your basic kitchen supplies. You will be glad that you did, because then you'll be able to get to what you need immediately without having to unpack the whole house to find out what you need. You want to inspect the property. We talked about this earlier in an earlier tip, but you want to do it again right before you move in, before you take anything in. You want to go through. Once you arrive, you want to do another thorough inspection. You want to take photos. Make sure you're noting any damage that you see. You want to document that and get that immediately to the landlord. Hey, landlord, when I came in here, there wasn't this little hole in the wall, but now there's a hole in the wall. I'm sending this to you now. I'm about to move in, but I want you to note this as something that you need to know about. And then you might even want to have something that you both sign so that you both acknowledge it, because you don't want that to come back on you later, and it wasn't your fault when you're trying to get that security deposit. So those are some of the tips. So we've talked about the moving company scams, how to get those boxes and everything labeled. Let's talk about some other essentials that you're going to need to move in. We talked about inspecting the property, making sure you're doing that walkthrough, documenting the walls, the floors, the fixtures, the appliances. You want to make sure that you redocument, even though you've done it before, because I told you to. You want to redocument right before you move in the same thing. That way, even if there's a dispute later, say it's a wall, you can show, well, that ding was in the wall when we first walked through together, Mr. Landlord, and that ding is in the wall still now. Why are you trying to ding me now and tell me that it's going to reduce my security deposit? You will have your documented proof. I would tell you, put those photos in the cloud, put them in a file somewhere so that you can have them, because a year later or 2 years later, when you get ready to move, believe me, you don't want that phone to have gone out and you can't get back to it. You want to have access to those pictures. You want to go through and test every appliance and utilities. You want to check the oven, the fridge, the dishwasher. Yeah, you want to actually run a dishwasher through its entire cycle, because it might look good, it might come on, but if you don't run it through that whole cycle, you might not know at some point it starts to leak on the floor or the water is underneath it. You just never know. You need to run those things. You need to microwave something. Make sure that it is actually working. Make sure the gas, if it's gas or the electric eyes work. I'm not saying you have to bake something, but you might want to try it at different temperatures and see, make sure that it's working. The water, you want to go to every faucet, make sure it's off, and put your hand under it. Look, or either look at the bottom of the sink, see it hasn't been dripping. Does it drip? Does it leak? Look under the sinks, the kitchen sink, the bathroom sinks. You want to look under there, see if there's any moisture. You should have done this before, but you want to redo it again before you move in, and make sure that there's no leaks that you can see or anything that would be of concern. And you want to make sure each and everything is functionally possible. The HVAC, you want to turn the heat on and make sure it gets hot. You want to turn the air on and make sure it gets cool. The ceiling fans, you want to make sure they come on when you push the chain, and you want to make sure the lights come on. You want to make sure you have your smoke detectors in place and that the batteries are fresh and it's not beeping. I mean, you want to go through this with a fine tooth comb, and you will be glad you did. You may not thank me now, but you'll thank me later. Security keys and access. You want to make sure you have all the keys and that they work properly. If there are access cards that you need, you want to make sure those work properly, as well as any gate codes. Some gates you have people have to call you up. You want to test that. Have somebody in the apartment or the and call you up at the gate to make sure that the gates are working for you and the codes are working for you. If you have a parking space you want to go, make sure it's available to you and that there are no issues. If it's covered or whatever, you just want to make sure there are no issues. And again, you want to know that lease agreement like a Bible, like the back of your hand. You want to make sure you understand your responsibilities, particularly as it relates to maintenance and repairs and utility payments. And if not, clarify all of this before you sign and before you move in. Okay, there's some steps you need to take, as well as getting, like I said, planning ahead. We talked already about getting that moving company or whoever's going to move you lined up, making sure you have your boxes and your bubble wrap and all of those things, your markers, so that you are ready and prepared to move. Now we're going to talk about some other steps that you will and should take before moving in. I'm going to take a break because I'm asking you, begging you, please, to make sure that you like this video and share and subscribe it so that we can share this with others. So we'll take a quick brief break. I'll come back and then we'll talk about steps to take before you move in and costs that you may need to consider, as well as some other tips. We'll be right back.
Tired of living paycheck to paycheck? With Exit Realty's residual income, you do the work once and get paid over and over. Learn how at joinexitrealty.com.
All right, we're back. We're going to delve right into steps to take before moving in. The utilities. Again, we talked about that in our last show. So you need to know, one, from your lease agreement and others, what utilities you need to pay. And then you also have to consider getting those done. And so you want to go ahead and get that work done, get those deposits, fill out the applications, whatever is necessary, and have them scheduled and ready to go. So when you move in, your internet will be working, your cable will be working, because these things you have planned in advance. I talked about this in an earlier one, but it's so important if you're a renter to arrange to get your renter's insurance. You want to protect your property. The landlord, they're going to have insurance that will be general coverage, and it will also cover them in case there's a fire there or there flooding or whatever. They're going to, or should I say, be able to cover their expenses if there's damage to the property. But what happens to you? A fire breaks out. And that happens. You see it all the time on the news where apartment complexes, there are fires. It wasn't you. You didn't start the fire. You didn't fall asleep while you were cooking chicken and the stove went crazy and the fire is all over the whole unit of the building. That wasn't your fault, but your unit was in that building, and now all of your belongings and things are burned. You don't have anywhere to go, nothing you can say, nothing you can do, but just cry like, "Oh no, what happened to me?" Well, at least if you have renter's insurance, you can get insurance that can help cover those expenses of those that your personal property that was damaged, because the property owner is not liable for your personal information. And some of the landlords that are smart require that you have proof of insurance. I would get it. There's different coverages. Some of it covers more things. Usually, when an apartment fire breaks out, the Red Cross and others will come in, but that's for very limited stay. They may put you up for a night, maybe two, but they're not going to take care of you forever or waiting months or maybe never for the apartment to be fixed. So you need to see what level you can afford and what will cover you, because some of them will also extend money for you to be able to have somewhere to stay. Plan your layout before you go. That's another thing to do. Look at the place, look at the furniture you have. Will everything I have here fit there? And if so, where do I want it? Where do I want the bed? What wall do I want that bed on? What wall do I want the couch on? The big items, because as you're moving, whether it's your uncle or your friend, your brother, or whether or sister, or whether it's a moving company, when they move large items in, they need to know where to place it, and you want them to place it as close to where you want it to be placed, because you're gonna be tired. You're not gonna want to be trying to scoot around a couch or a bed or something like that. Also, just with the moving companies as well, make sure you're looking at disassembling and assembling items like your bed and that kind of thing. Make sure that's included, because you don't want to have to try to put your bed together as well. So now, costs to consider, because it's always money, 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 money. But if you really took to heart our step number one budget, most of these things you will have covered for. And I always say have a contingency, because if things can go wrong, they will. The security deposit, making sure you have that at the first and last month's rent that some landlords may require. Make sure you have that. Make sure you have enough for your moving costs, whether it's a professional, whether it's your friend and buddy, and you're going to rent a truck. Make sure you have all of your utility setup fees ready to go. Some other tips as we wrap up that you might want to consider is getting multiple quotes again for everything, but particularly making sure you do that with your moving companies, because some are reputable, some are not. And if you go back earlier, I talked about some of those red flags that you need to look out for. Read for reviews and recommendations on these people, please. And then again, I always say with reviews and recommendations, make sure you're looking at a balance, and the Better Business Bureau, if it's a company, is always a good place to look. Confirm the items that are being moved before they take them out. Have your own checklist, have your own pictures of what they look like and that they're not damaged. So when they gets there and there's a little crack in your favorite mirror and they say, "Oh, well, we didn't do that." Well, you could say, "Hey, here's a picture of it right before we did the move. And it was wrapped properly, da 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 da, and now it's got a crack in it." And then always consider a backup plan and even a rain date, because sometimes the day that you decide to move, it could be a rainy day or something, and you may not want to try to do it in that day because of perhaps damage to your property. I hope those things gave you tips. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Think that I hit it all. I want to make sure that you think of these things prior to your move so that your move will be smooth. And so we will, in our next show, wrap up with our final tip, which is tip number 10, planning for the future. Yeah, planning's not over. So hopefully you had that smooth move in because you did all of the pre-work and you vetted your companies and you have looked at that lease over and over again. So when we come back at our next show, we will hit our final tip, tip number 10. So see you then. And please make sure if you are just tuning in that you like this video, subscribe if you haven't, share it please. And if you just joined us for tip number 9, don't start here. Go back to tip number 1. You don't want to move on without it. We'll see you at the next show. Take care.